I have to say, in recent years, bro science has been losing ground to good information. Protein shakes in the locker room? Only a few guys still do that. Morning fasted cardio to lose belly fat? Almost nobody does that anymore. In 2006, a fat loss plan would look like this. Small meals every 2 hours, chicken breast and broccoli, high rep workouts, carbs and fats eaten separately, all very strict and complicated. Back then, most people had no idea what really caused fat loss. Because of that, all aspects of their fat loss plan seemed of equal importance. Now, in 2016, a fat loss plan looks like this. Big difference. With the advancements in research, we learned that nutrition for fat loss has a clear hierarchy of importance. Some things matter a lot more than others. Actually, to get shredded, you really only have to do 3 things. Number 1, eat a 20-25% calorie deficit. Number 2, eat around 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. And number 3, lift weights to maintain muscle. We've learned that these 3 things are so important that even if you do everything else suboptimally, you'll still get shredded. This understanding has started a new chapter for the fitness world. People no longer had to follow strict meal plans. Instead, they could set meal frequency, meal timing, food choices, and cardio based on their lifestyle, so the plan is enjoyable and easy to follow. I think this mentality shift is great. Make your fitness plan as simple and enjoyable as possible, even if it's not optimal. Because in the end, and I think a lot of people as well, would rather lose fat a bit slower, diet an extra week, if that means the whole diet is much easier to follow. But what if you're a physique athlete who wants to maximize his competitive potential? What if you don't care about a simple and enjoyable diet and just want the most optimal fat loss plan possible? What would be the best way to set meal frequency, cardio, food choices, protein timing, and everything else? Could you significantly improve your fat loss results if you did everything optimally? Well, I'm not the best person to answer this question, so I asked Eric Helms to help us out. Eric is a professional natural bodybuilder, powerlifter, coach, researcher, writer, has 2 master's degrees, and is now doing his PhD in Auckland, New Zealand. He's one of the smartest guys on the fitness scene. In this video, I'll be asking Eric if this list of things actually makes a difference for fat loss. Here's Eric Helms. The first question, Eric, is, do you think calorie cycling speeds up fat loss? Or do you think there's another benefit to doing calorie and macrocycling?
If you are pushing to the very low levels of body fat, I would say yes. You know, the benefit to calorie cycling is typically only apparent when you're trying to get really lean. Once you're starting to drop down to, say, 10% body fat or lower for males, or say maybe under 20% body fat for women, that's when I think the benefits become apparent. So, you know, having 1 to 3 days per week where you are closer to maintenance and you increase your carbohydrates to get there, and then the other days are where you accumulate your deficit, that's a very useful approach. And if you think about it, anytime you take a diet break or a refeed, it's a day of not dieting, you know? And it means typically that the training that day and probably the next day are going to be a little bit better, especially if it's higher volume or glycogen dependent. And also if it keeps your stress levels lower and you are just finding the diet more acceptable and easier to adhere to, that could have some physiological effect over, say, a 6-month contest prep. There's not a ton of data to support this, but from what I've seen as a bodybuilding coach, it seems to reduce the overall length of the diet, and sometimes people come in with more muscle mass. And at the moment, the only data showing a fat loss or muscle retention advantage aren't in, you know, people getting very lean. They are in obese people. So I could be wrong, and maybe I'm just making wrong anecdotal observations, but it seems to be a pretty consistent finding. And there's at least a theoretical basis for it based on changes in leptin, glycogen replenishment, things like that, reduction in cortisol. So I think there's a strong argument to be made that, at least based on the evidence we have now, that it could give you a fat loss advantage for a longer diet to a low body fat level.
I also asked Eric about the advantages of cycling calories every day, higher intakes on training days and lower intakes on rest days. He thinks this approach is beneficial in the case of a smaller weekly calorie deficit, like at the end of a cut. When you get very lean, the risk of muscle loss is higher. For that reason, it's best to reduce the rate of fat loss by bringing down the deficit. Also, more frequent refeeds may be helpful. They will probably allow you to better maintain workout performance and muscle mass. However, in the case of rapid fat loss, frequent refeeds may actually be detrimental. For example, to lose 1.5 pounds of fat per week, you have to create a deficit of about 5,000 calories. If you have 3 or more workouts per week and those days are at maintenance, it means you need to accumulate all that deficit on your rest days. The problem now is that the difference between your high and low days would be around 1,300 calories. That is a large deficit and would probably impact training the next day. Because, for example, complete glycogen resynthesis can take up to 24 hours. Also, adaptation from training does not occur only on the day of training. Rather, adaptation is a continual process. Having too little food on your off days could negatively affect recovery and muscle growth. So, is calorie or macro cycling worth doing? Yes, if you're very lean. 1 to 3 refeeds per week can improve workout performance, muscle maintenance, and mood. When you're not very lean, having frequent refeeds is probably unnecessary. Alright, next question. For muscle maintenance, does it matter when and how often you eat your protein as long as you hit your macros?
Yeah, I think it does. The question of how much does it matter, the magnitude is the big question mark there. So if you eat a whole lot of protein at one sitting, it's not that it doesn't do anything. It certainly does have a lot of positive effects, but it might not quite give you as much efficiency for gaining muscle mass over time as having those boluses spread out. So you're having maybe 20 to 50 grams of protein 3 to 4 times a day or 5 times a day. Versus having 80 or 90 grams of protein twice or 3 times a day, of course depending on body weight. And then another point is that there may be a slight advantage to consuming one of those protein feedings after your training or on both sides of your training, although the advantage would be very slight. So for example, there was a meta-analysis by Aragon, Krieger, and Schoenfeld that found a very small benefit for having protein post-workout within 2 hours. Didn't quite reach statistical significance, but it might have practical relevance. And that would suggest that, total macronutrient intake is multiple notches above in terms of importance and the magnitude of effect it'll have on muscle retention, but that there is still some effective timing. The way I eat, for example, some might call it like a modified time-restricted feeding or intermittent fasting. I'm never hungry in the morning, so why would I eat a whole lot? It makes it difficult, it makes me uncomfortable, and it's just not what I want to do. So when I wake up in the morning, I typically have like a Quest bar. It's 20 grams of whey protein, basically, and a little bit of carbohydrate and a small amount of fat. And then I have a small lunch, maybe is 500, 600 calories tops. For a guy who weighs, 216 pounds and is 6 foot, that's a very small number of calories for my total expenditure for the day. But it also includes another 30 plus grams of protein. And then I have a post-workout shake, and then I have a very large dinner. So I'm having maybe 20 to 40 grams of protein 3 times earlier in the day, but only eating, say, a total of 800 calories by, say, 6 p.m. And then at around 6 or 7, I'm having 1,000 to 2,000 calories, and also including protein. And that's just when I'm hungry, and that's just the way I eat. And that looks very similar to intermittent fasting, yet I'm also ticking the boxes of having peri-workout protein and having protein feedings earlier in the day.
The current research suggests that to maximize protein synthesis, it's best to have 3 or more protein feedings spread out throughout the day. Just 1 or 2 feedings should be inferior, although we don't know by how much, probably very little. When it comes to meal frequency for burning fat, that really doesn't matter. Studies looked at variations in meal frequency from 2 to 7 meals per day, and no significant differences in energy expenditure were found. In the past, people thought a higher meal frequency burned more fat because your body had to break down and process food several times a day, and that required more energy. However, it's been proven that the thermic effect of food depends only on the total caloric intake. It's about 10 to 15% depending on what you eat. So if you eat 2000 calories in 2 meals or 6 meals, the thermic effect of food would be the same. So, is meal frequency relevant for your fat loss results? Yes, for protein timing. To maximize muscle retention or growth, it's probably best to have 3 or more protein feedings per day. For fat loss, it doesn't matter as long as the deficit is the same. What about food quality, Eric? Does it affect body composition, or it doesn't matter what you eat as long as you hit your macros for fat loss?
Food quality definitely does affect body composition. When I think food quality, I think of their micronutrient density. Micronutrients do have an important role on health, satiety, and it can in fact affect body composition. There was a recent study that came out showing that even mild and moderate levels of iron deficiency in female volleyball players had a lower strength level than a group that was supplemented with it, just showing how being deficient in a micronutrient can have a negative impact on the body. So if your diet is lacking, that is where the problem is. However, I don't want people to take that too far and think that their diet needs to be just absolutely overflowing with micronutrients and they can only eat micronutrient-rich foods, because it's not like you get extra credit at a certain point. I think a better way to look at it is just that foods are carriers for nutrients, and nutrients aren't solely defined as vitamins and minerals. There are others. Phytonutrients and zoonutrients are classes of, we'll say, nutritional compounds that don't fall into the category of vitamins and minerals that have a positive effect on the body. And sometimes it is multiple compounds and their interaction that exist in a food that have a beneficial effect on the body. And sometimes you'll find that when we try to isolate a single nutrient, supply it in pill or powder form, it doesn't quite have the same benefit. And I do agree that hitting your macronutrients will dictate body composition change more importantly than micronutrient intake. However, it doesn't mean that they don't have any impact at all.
The trend in the fitness industry right now is if it fits your macros. Basically, you can eat anything you want and get ripped as long as you hit your macronutrient targets. And that is correct. In the short term, you won't notice any difference between a diet low in micronutrients and one rich in micronutrients. However, if you do not include enough real whole foods in your diet for a long period of time, you will develop deficiencies as a result. And those deficiencies can weaken your immune system, lower testosterone levels, lower energy levels, lower strength levels, and make you hungrier, which will affect body composition. So, does food quality affect fat loss? Yes, but indirectly and in the long term. Make sure 80 to 90% of your diet is made out of real whole foods, and the rest 10 to 20% can be filled with empty calories. Let's talk a bit about cardio and fat loss. Is there an advantage to creating a part of your calorie deficit through cardio?
Is there an advantage to creating part of your calorie deficit through cardio? I used to say that you probably wanted to include some cardio, but I don't actually think there is. I think the advantage might be through adherence. If you do it completely through calorie restriction, sometimes that can mean the diet feeling harder. Because a small amount of cardio you don't even notice, you might even enjoy depending on if you're doing a type that you like. And this can offset some of the normal reductions in non-exercise activity calorie expenditure. So balancing out your deficit over a mixture of cardio and calorie restriction typically makes the diet easier. You get to eat a little more food. And even though physiologically you're going to react to the size of the deficit regardless of where it comes from, the psychological feeling might be different having more food and a little bit of cardio, but I don't think there'd be any inherent physiological benefit. It could only be a detriment if you were doing inappropriate cardio.
Cardio does produce some adaptations that make your body better at burning fat. However, to get those adaptations, you'd have to do a lot of endurance work. And a recent meta-analysis showed that there is an inverse relationship between the amount of cardio you do and the rate of progress on hypertrophy, power, and strength.
So to do an amount of cardio that might get those widespread adaptations that make your body better at burning fat might also mean that you're sacrificing your rate of muscle retention. In the end, a calorie deficit has to get paid off from somewhere. And if you are retaining muscle mass from progressive resistance training, then it's going to come from fat.
So, is there an advantage to creating a part of your calorie deficit through cardio? Yes, because you get to eat more food and the diet feels easier to follow. However, cardio doesn't make you lose fat more efficiently if you're also lifting weights. Because if you're lifting weights, you're maintaining muscle, and the calorie deficit will be paid from burning fat. But what about fasted training or cardio? Does fasted training improve the rate of fat loss?
I do not believe that fasted training improves the rate of fat loss. And I would say that the higher the intensity that fasted training, it could actually get in the way because you will have more difficulty getting your heart rate as high and burning as many calories. Fasted training will make you burn more fat during that training session, but we don't really care about fat oxidation for 30 minutes to an hour. We care about fat oxidation over a 24-hour period. Some studies that suggest that burning a lot of carbohydrate during your training window might even mean that you're going to be burning more fat for the rest of the day because now there's less glycogen to rely on. The one direct study I know of fasted cardio, there was not a difference in terms of body composition or weight loss. I think a meta-analysis did just come out that showed that fat oxidation is higher during the workout when you do fasted cardio, but that's kind of a no duh. But that's not the right question. The question is does it assist in long-term fat loss? I think the stubborn fat protocols are based on theory. It's not like someone has done stubborn fat protocols versus something else and done regional specific fat loss in the legs or the quote-unquote stubborn areas. Having played with fasted cardio and Yohimbine and fasted HIIT with myself and clients, in the end, stubborn fat always seems to come off last. And maybe it's an adjunct benefit that I just don't have the minute enough detail-oriented eye to see the change in clients, and I haven't done enough comparisons. But until we actually have a head-to-head study that tells me otherwise, I can only rely on the fact that I haven't seen anything to support that contention outside of theoretical-based data.
So, does fasted training or cardio speed up fat loss? Probably not. Even if you burn more fat during that workout, you'll probably burn more carbs during the rest of the day. Actually, fasted training may interfere with your workout performance, especially if you do a high volume workout. So it seems you have nothing to gain and potentially something to lose if you train fasted for better fat loss. And the final question, Eric, do you think fat burning supplements improve the rate of fat loss? I'm referring to potentially effective substances like caffeine, L-tyrosine, synephrine, naringin, stuff like that.
The vast majority of the legal non-FDA banned fat burners have very minimal effects on fat loss. The main benefits of things like caffeine and tyrosine is more their effect on energy levels and mood, which might indirectly mean you're not seeing your calorie expenditure drop as much. I've definitely seen caffeine be kind of a neat saver in competitors. A regular caffeine dose just to have them not feeling as lethargic, I would think would have a beneficial effect on total energy expenditure for the day, but it's not that compound is specifically burning more fat. And here's the thing, if you actually increase energy expenditure, that doesn't necessarily mean that your hunger levels don't just go up with it. Like most people who are, let's say, construction workers, they eat more than everyone else because they're more hungry, because they have a higher energy requirement. Our body is set up to maintain a certain body weight. So that means that if you were to take some compound that greatly increased your energy expenditure, you would be more hungry and you'd naturally want to eat more.
The fat-burning supplements that are legal, so drugs aside, have a very minimal effect on fat loss. And they don't actually burn fat directly. Most of them are stimulants, which make you more active, which means you burn more energy. So, do fat burners help with the rate of fat loss? Maybe, if they prevent non-exercise activity thermogenesis from going down. But you probably could achieve the same effect by drinking coffee. So let's wrap this video up. There are 3 things that are non-negotiable for a successful cut. Number 1, having a 20-25% calorie deficit. Number 2, eating around 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. And number 3, training with an effective program to maintain or gain muscle mass. To improve this plan further, you can do this. Number 1, include 1 or 2 refeeds per week, especially when you get very lean. Plus, take a week at maintenance every 6 to 8 weeks of dieting. Number 2, have 3 or more protein feedings per day. Number 3, get 80 to 90% of your calories from real whole foods, plus supplement with a good multivitamin. Number 4, do 2 or 3 hours of cardio per week if you want to eat more food. And number 5, drink some coffee if you're feeling lethargic so NEAT doesn't go down. It's still very simple. Remember, aside from the non-negotiable things, everything else can be set up around adherence. What's most important is that your fat loss plan is simple and enjoyable to follow. Hey, it's Radu again. Thanks for watching this video. Eric took time to do this video with me in the middle of collecting data for his PhD, so make sure to send him some love on his Facebook page and YouTube. Also, he's the author of 2 awesome ebooks, The Muscle and Strength Training and Nutrition Pyramids. They are my 2 favorite fitness books and also Eric's best work. I highly recommend you check them out. To watch more of Eric's free content, go to their YouTube channel Team3DMJ. And for more videos like this one, make sure to subscribe to both of our channels.